I used to think betrayal had to look like cheating. A lipstick mark, a late night text, a hotel receipt tucked into a pocket like a confession you could hold in your hand. But the thing that detonated my marriage didn't come with proof. It came with a man standing in the doorway of my home office, wearing my husband's robe like it belonged to him, and then screaming that I attacked him the second I shoved him away. And the worst part? My husband didn't ask a single question. Not one. My name is Mira. I'm 32, and I've been married to Rohan for 2 years. An arranged marriage our families celebrated like a trophy. The kind of marriage with hundreds of guests, endless blessings, and that unspoken rule nobody says out loud: swallow your discomfort, because this is how it's done. I tried. God, I tried. And then Samir moved back to the city. Samir, Rohan's best friend since childhood. The brother who always showed up with loud laughter and bigger opinions. The one Rohan trusted more than anyone. The one my in-laws adored because he made the room feel lighter. At first, I was relieved. Rohan and I had been fine, polite, functional. Two people trying to build intimacy out of obligation. So when Samir was around, Rohan smiled more. The air felt less tense. Then the little things started. Samir's hand lingering too long when he passed me a dish. His voice dropping low when Rohan stepped into another room. The way he looked at me like we shared a secret I never agreed to. I told myself I was being dramatic, that I was misreading friendliness as flirtation because my marriage already felt fragile, until the day Rohan wasn't home. I was working, laptop open, spreadsheets glowing, my coffee gone cold. The doorbell rang. Samir's voice floated in from the hallway. Casual, entitled. I just need to grab something Rohan asked me to pick up. I let him in. I wish I hadn't. Because 15 minutes later, he walked into my office in a robe that smelled like my husband. And he made a move that turned my whole life into a courtroom. And when I refused, when I pushed him away, he decided to punish me with the one weapon I couldn't defend against. A lie people love to believe. If you'd met me before I got married, you would have said I was the responsible one. Not the loudest in the room. Not the most effortlessly charming, but steady. The woman people call when they need a plan, a ride, a resume proofread at midnight. I worked in operations for a mid-sized company. Deadlines, logistics, endless emails. Nothing glamorous, but it gave me independence. I liked paying my own rent. I liked buying my own groceries. I liked the quiet pride of not owing anyone explanations. And in our community, a woman like that gets described in two voices. The polite one, she's doing so well. The other one, whispered behind teacups, she's getting older. I was 29 when the first casual conversation started. My mother, smiling too brightly while handing me a plate of fruit. My aunt, pretending it was a joke while her eyes measured me. Family friends saying, "We know a good boy," like they were offering me a job opening. I had dated before, not wildly, not recklessly, just enough to know what I wanted: respect, warmth, a partner who felt like home. But the men I met either wanted someone to shrink for them or someone to be their mother in a nicer outfit. After a while, I stopped trying so hard. I focused on work. I focused on my health. I told myself love would come when it came. Then I met Rohan. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a meeting arranged like a business deal. Two families, a restaurant with too bright lighting, polite questions that pretended to be natural. Rohan was 31. He worked in tech, stable, respected, the kind of man parents love because his career sounds safe. He was soft-spoken around elders, careful with words. He asked me what I liked to do. I said I loved long walks, documentaries, cooking when I wasn't exhausted. He smiled like that was the right answer. And I remember thinking, at least he's not arrogant. He wasn't romantic, not at first, but he was consistent. He texted good morning. He showed up on time. He asked if I ate. He said the right things in the right tone. Everyone around me exhaled like I'd finally stopped being a problem. My mother cried with relief when the engagement was announced. Rohan proposed at a family dinner, not a private moment, not a question between two people, more like a public ceremony where the yes was expected. The ring was heavy on my finger, and the room erupted in applause before I had time to feel anything real. I told myself love could be built. I told myself commitment comes first sometimes. Our wedding was massive. Days of events. Gold, music, cameras, aunties analyzing everything from my hairline to my smile. I remember standing beside Rohan in the flood of noise, feeling like I'd stepped onto a stage and forgotten my lines. The first year of marriage was fine. We didn't fight often, we weren't cruel to each other, but we weren't close either. We lived side by side like roommates who shared family obligations. Rohan liked big gatherings. I preferred quiet. He could talk for hours about his projects, his friends, his plans. When I spoke about my day, he listened, technically, while his eyes drifted to his phone. Sometimes he'd reach for my hand in public, like he remembered he was supposed to. Sometimes he'd forget. But I kept trying. I really did. I tried cooking his favorite meals. I tried watching the movies his family loved. I tried showing up with a smile, even when my chest felt tight from the effort of being good. Because in an arranged marriage, you don't leave at the first disappointment. You don't leave when the spark doesn't show up on schedule. You don't leave because you feel lonely in the same room as your husband. You leave when something breaks so loudly that even the community can't pretend it's normal. And I didn't think anything could break that loudly, until Samir came back. Rohan talked about him like a legend, childhood best friend. Basically my brother. The guy who knew all the stories, all the embarrassing secrets, all the things about Rohan that I, his wife, still didn't know. The first time Samir came over, he hugged Rohan like he'd been starving for him. Their laughter filled the apartment in a way my silence never did. Samir looked at me and smiled wide. "So you're Mira," he said, like he'd been waiting to see what kind of woman Rohan ended up with. "Rohan's finally married. I didn't think it would ever happen." I laughed politely. Rohan laughed too, but his shoulders loosened, relaxed, in a way I rarely saw. And at first I told myself, this is good. Maybe this will make Rohan lighter. Maybe this will make us easier. But then I started noticing how Samir didn't treat me like a sister. He treated me like an opportunity. At first, the discomfort didn't have a name. It was just a sensation, like a low hum under my skin whenever Samir was around. A feeling I brushed off because it didn't come with anything concrete. No obvious lines crossed. No moment dramatic enough to point at and say this is wrong. Just patterns. Samir started coming over when Rohan wasn't home. He'd text Rohan first, of course, always framed it as casual. "Hey, I'm nearby. Just checking in. Thought I'd surprise you guys." But Rohan's job had him at the office late more often than not, and Samir never seemed bothered by that. He'd still knock. The first few times I didn't think much of it. He was friendly. Overly friendly, maybe. But some people are like that. He'd sit too close on the couch, his knee brushing mine. He'd laugh loudly at things that weren't that funny. He'd comment on my cooking, my clothes, the way I styled my hair. "You don't dress like most married women," he said once, eyes lingering just a second too long. I forced a smile. "I dress like myself." He laughed. "Fair enough, lucky Rohan." Something in the way he said it made my stomach tighten. I started timing my movements when he was around, keeping distance, finding reasons to step into another room, staying busy. When Rohan was there, Samir behaved. Jokes stayed clean. Touches stayed appropriate. It was like he understood exactly how far he could go without witnesses. Once, while Rohan stepped out to take a call, Samir leaned in and lowered his voice. "You ever feel like you settled?" I froze. "Excuse me?" "With marriage," he clarified quickly, flashing a grin. "Everyone does. It's normal." I told myself I was imagining the edge in his tone. I told myself not to read into it. I told myself that if I reacted, I'd look dramatic. That's the thing about being a woman in a marriage like mine. You learn early how to swallow discomfort so it doesn't become an accusation against you. I didn't tell Rohan, not because I trusted Samir, but because I didn't trust what would happen if I did. Rohan adored him, defended him, spoke about him with a softness I rarely received. Samir was the friend who always had his back, the one who helped him through college stress, family drama, job rejections, the one his parents praised constantly. If I said something, anything, there would be questions. "Are you sure you're not misreading him? He's always been like that. You're sensitive. Why would he do that? He's like family." And underneath all of it, why are you trying to cause problems? So I kept quiet. But Samir didn't stop. He started finding excuses to be alone with me, asking for help with his phone, complaining about his dating life, talking about how hard it was to find someone who understood him. Once he brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. I stepped back so fast I nearly knocked over a chair. "Don't," I said, sharper than I meant to. He raised his hands like I'd misunderstood him. "Relax. I was just being friendly." I avoided him after that, or tried to. Then came the day I was working from home. Rohan had left early. kissed my cheek distractedly, told me Samir might stop by later because he'd borrowed something and needed to return it. My chest tightened instantly. I considered saying no. I considered texting Rohan and asking him to reschedule, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. I didn't want to explain something I still couldn't fully articulate. So when the doorbell rang, I opened it. Samir smiled like he'd been invited. He sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone, making himself comfortable. I went back to my laptop, hoping he'd get bored and leave. That's when he disappeared down the hallway. I heard the bedroom door open, then footsteps. And when he stepped into my office doorway, he was wearing Rohan's robe. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. "Samir," I said, standing up so fast my chair slammed into the wall. "What are you doing?" He smirked. "Relax. I spilled something on my shirt." I opened my mouth to tell him to leave. He didn't give me the chance. He reached for the belt of the robe, and in that instant, the vague discomfort, the ignored warnings, the swallowed instincts, all of it snapped into horrifying clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a trap. Time does something strange when fear hits. Everything slowed down, like my body was wading through water while my brain screamed at full volume. "Stop," I said, my voice coming out sharper, louder than I felt. "Put your clothes on. Right now." Samir didn't freeze the way an innocent person would. He didn't look confused or embarrassed. He looked annoyed, like I'd ruined something he thought he was entitled to. "Don't act like this is shocking," he said lightly, tugging the robe open just enough to make my stomach flip. "You felt it too." "I have not," I snapped, stepping back until my calves hit the edge of the desk. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "You need to leave, now." He took a step closer. "You're unhappy," he said, voice low, intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. "Anyone can see that. Rohan barely looks at you anymore. You deserve attention." My hands were shaking, not with attraction, with adrenaline. "This is my house," I said. "Get out." That's when he reached for me. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't romantic. It was fast and confident, like he'd rehearsed it in his head enough times that my refusal didn't register as real. I shoved him. Hard. He stumbled back into the doorframe, the robe slipping off one shoulder, and for a split second his face changed. Not to hurt, not to shock, but to something calculating. Then he screamed. "Why are you doing this?" he yelled, voice cracking theatrically. "Stop! Stop!" The front door opened. I heard keys, a bag hitting the counter. "Mira," Rohan's voice. Samir's eyes flicked to the hallway. And then, like flipping a switch, he collapsed. He hit the floor hard, curling in on himself, sobbing. "She attacked me," he cried, loud enough for the whole apartment to hear. "I don't know why. She just came at me." I stood there, frozen, breath coming in sharp gasps, my hands still outstretched from pushing him away. Rohan appeared in the doorway. He took in the scene in one glance. Samir on the floor, half-dressed and crying, and me standing over him, shaking. "What the hell is going on?" Rohan demanded. Samir didn't let me answer. "I tried to leave," he sobbed. "I swear. She just snapped. I don't know what I did wrong." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My brain was screaming, "This isn't real," while my body felt like it had been unplugged. "That's not what happened," I finally said, my voice thin. "Rohan, Why is he in your robe?" Rohan cut in. Samir covered his face. "I spilled something. She offered it. Then she started acting weird." The lie landed perfectly. It had props, timing, emotion. Rohan looked at me like he didn't recognize me. "You were alone with him?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. "Yes, but—" "And you thought this was appropriate?" My chest burned. Rohan listened to me. He came into my office. He took off his clothes. I told him to leave. Samir shook his head violently. "She's lying. I would never do that. You know me." And that was it. That was the moment I realized I was standing in a rigged trial. Because Rohan didn't ask for details. He didn't ask why Samir had come unannounced. He didn't ask why his brother would lie. He just stared at me like something inside him had already decided. "Get dressed," he told Samir gently. "I'll handle this." Then he turned to me. "I can't believe you," he said. "Not I'm confused, not help me understand. Just, I can't believe you." Something inside me cracked so sharply I almost heard it. Shock doesn't always look dramatic. It doesn't always come with screaming or collapsing or sobbing into the floor. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's standing perfectly still while the man you married looks at you like you're a stranger he's suddenly afraid of. Rohan didn't yell. That almost made it worse. He helped Samir up from the floor, his hand steady on his shoulder, guiding him toward the bedroom like he was the one who needed protection. Samir wouldn't meet my eyes as he passed me. He kept his head bowed, playing the part perfectly. I stood there, my pulse roaring in my ears, my mouth dry. Rohan, I said, forcing my voice not to shake. Please, listen to me. He didn't answer right away. He closed the bedroom door behind Samir, gave him privacy, gave him dignity. Then he came back into the living room and crossed his arms. I don't understand why you would do this, he said. His tone wasn't angry. It was disappointed, like I'd failed some test he never told me I was taking. I didn't, I said. I swear to you. He came on to me. I pushed him away. That's it. Rohan exhaled slowly through his nose. Mira, this doesn't make sense. What part doesn't make sense? My voice cracked, despite my effort to keep it together. That your best friend behaved badly? Or that I said no? He wouldn't do that, Rohan replied instantly. The speed of it hit me like a slap. You didn't even hesitate, I said quietly. Rohan frowned. Because I know him. And you know me, I said. Or at least I thought you did. He looked away. That hurt more than anything else so far. Samir emerged a few minutes later, fully dressed now, eyes red, posture fragile. He stood behind Rohan, just slightly, close enough to signal allegiance. I don't want to cause problems between you two, Samir said softly. I didn't expect this. I need some space. Rohan nodded. Of course, you can stay at my parents' place tonight. My stomach dropped. You're letting him leave, I said, without even hearing me? Rohan's jaw tightened. I heard you. No, I whispered. You dismissed me. Samir glanced at me then, just for a second, and in that second, the mask slipped. There was no fear there, no pain. There was triumph. After he left, the apartment felt hollow, like all the oxygen had been sucked out and replaced with something thin and cold. Rohan sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. This is serious, he said. Do you realize what you've done? I stared at him. What I've done? You've accused my best friend of something unforgivable. I accused him of exactly what he did, I said. My hands were trembling now, and I didn't bother hiding it. And instead of protecting your wife, you protected him. Rohan finally looked up at me, eyes hard. If this gets out, it will destroy him. The words landed like a verdict. Not us, not me, him. Something inside me went very still. I was the one alone, I said. I was the one he cornered. I was the one who said no, and you're worried about his reputation. Rohan didn't answer. That was his answer. He told me he needed time to think. He told me I should stay with my sister for a few days, until things cool down. He said it like he was being reasonable. I packed a bag in silence. As I zipped it shut, my reflection in the mirror startled me. I looked pale, smaller, like someone who'd been erased halfway through a sentence. At the door, I turned back one last time. If you choose him, I said, my voice steady despite everything inside me breaking, you're telling me exactly where I stand. Rohan didn't respond. And that silence, heavy, deliberate, told me everything I needed to know. I thought the worst part would be the accusation itself. I was wrong. The worst part was how fast the lie started to grow, how quickly it slipped out of our apartment and into the mouths of people who already had opinions about me, people who were more than happy to believe the worst version. By the second day at my sister's place, my phone had become something I dreaded touching. Missed calls from Rohan's mother, messages from his aunt, a long voicemail from his father that I couldn't bring myself to listen to more than once. You've embarrassed this family, his mother said, her voice tight and furious. Do you have any idea what you've done? I sat on the edge of my sister's bed, phone pressed to my ear, my hands numb. I didn't do anything, I said quietly. I was protecting myself. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. How dare you say that about Samir? He's like a son to us. I closed my eyes. That sentence, like a son, kept coming back, no matter who I spoke to. Rohan didn't call me, not once. Instead, he sent a message, short, clinical. Until you're ready to take responsibility, I think space is best. Take responsibility. For being assaulted? For saying no? For refusing to disappear quietly? Samir, meanwhile, was suddenly everywhere. He posted vague quotes on social media about betrayal and trauma, about trusting the wrong people. Friends commented with heart emojis and messages of support. Rohan's cousins shared his posts, writing things like, "So proud of your strength," and "The truth always comes out." My stomach churned every time I saw his name. When I tried to defend myself, to explain what actually happened, I was met with cold politeness at best, hostility at worst. Why would he lie? He has no reason to. Maybe you misunderstood. You've always been sensitive. Sensitive. That word followed me everywhere, like it had been waiting its whole life to be used against me. A week later, Rohan finally agreed to meet me, only because his parents insisted we resolve this properly. We met in his parents' living room, under the watchful eyes of family photos and judgment. Samir was there. So were Rohan's parents. I sat on one end of the couch, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Samir sat across from me, eyes downcast, looking fragile. Rohan sat beside him. Not beside me. Samir spoke first. I don't want to do this, he said softly, but I need to protect myself. Protect himself. He described the incident in careful, rehearsed detail, how I'd invited him in, how I'd sent mixed signals, how I'd lost control. He said he was scared, that he felt violated. Rohan's mother shook her head, tears in her eyes. We trusted you, she said to me. We welcomed you into this family. I felt like I was shrinking under their gaze. When it was my turn to speak, my voice trembled, despite my effort to keep it steady. He came into my office wearing Rohan's robe, I said. He tried to touch me. I pushed him away, that's all. Samir looked up then, eyes filled with wounded disbelief. Why would you make this up? Rohan looked at me, not with anger now, but with something worse. Doubt? If this really happened, he said slowly, why didn't you tell me earlier that Samir was making you uncomfortable? The question was sharp, precise, and unfair. Because the answer was too complicated for that room. Because I didn't think I'd be believed. Because I didn't want to be the wife who caused trouble. Because I trusted him. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. And in that pause, the room made its decision. Rohan's father cleared his throat. Mira, for the sake of everyone involved, you should apologize. The word hit me like a slap. Apologize, I repeated. To Samir, his mother said firmly. Publicly, so this can end. Something inside me hardened then, quietly, irrevocably. No, I said. The room went still. Rohan stared at me. You're choosing pride over peace. I met his eyes, my heart pounding. I'm choosing the truth. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about Samir's lie anymore. It was about control, about reputation, about how easily a woman's reality could be rewritten if it inconvenienced the wrong people. And it was only going to get worse. There's a moment when you're fighting something long enough where exhaustion turns into something darker. Not anger, not fear, resignation. It happened about 3 weeks after I left the apartment. 3 weeks of sleeping on my sister's couch. 3 weeks of waking up every morning with my chest tight, bracing myself before I even checked my phone. Because every notification felt like another verdict. More messages from extended family. Cousins I barely spoke to anymore, suddenly bold enough to tell me I should be ashamed. An aunt who said I'd brought dishonor into a marriage that had given me everything. Someone else suggesting, casually, that maybe therapy would help me understand why I behaved the way I did. I stopped responding. What was the point? The story had already been written. I was the unstable wife, the jealous woman, the one who couldn't handle boundaries. Samir was the wounded friend. Rohan was the tragic husband caught in the middle. And I was so tired. One night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan in my sister's spare room, listening to its uneven hum. My body felt heavy, like it belonged to someone else. I replayed the moment in my office over and over, not because I doubted myself, but because I kept searching for the version of reality where I could have done something differently. Should I have screamed sooner? Should I have called Rohan immediately? Should I have recorded something? Anything? The questions ate at me. I hated myself for not being prepared for violence I never consented to. Rohan still hadn't spoken to me directly. Everything went through his parents now. They sent a message saying he would consider reconciliation if I apologized and agreed to move forward quietly. Quietly. As if silence had ever protected me. I cried that night. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just tears sliding down into my hair while I pressed my fist against my mouth to keep from making noise. I cried for the marriage I tried to build, for the version of myself who thought being patient would earn love, for the fact that the man I slept beside for 2 years could look at me and choose someone else's story over my truth. For the first time, I wondered if walking away would be easier. Not because I was wrong, but because fighting felt impossible. That was my lowest point. The moment where I almost convinced myself that maybe standing my ground wasn't worth losing everything. And then, unexpectedly, my phone rang. It was Aisha, Samir's cousin. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, maybe instinct, maybe desperation, made me swipe the screen. Mira, she said softly, I don't know how to say this without shaking. My heart started pounding. I heard something, she continued, something you need to know, and I think you were telling the truth. I sat up so fast the room spun. What do you mean? I whispered. Aisha took a breath. Samir was talking. He didn't realize I was in the room, and what he said, Mira, he admitted it. He said he lied because he couldn't handle being rejected. The ceiling fan blurred above me as my vision filled with tears, not of despair this time, but something sharp and electric. Hope! For the first time since my world collapsed, the darkness cracked. I asked Aisha to repeat herself, not because I didn't hear her, but because my brain couldn't yet accept what my heart was clinging to. He said it himself, she said again, more firmly this time. He said he panicked, that he didn't think you'd push him away so forcefully. And when you did, he flipped it. He said it was easier to make you the villain than admit he'd crossed a line. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press my phone flat against my thigh to steady it. Did anyone else hear this? I asked. There was a pause. Yes, Aisha said. My roommate, and I recorded part of it. The world went very quiet. Not empty quiet, focused quiet. The kind that comes right before something irreversible happens. I didn't plan to, she rushed to explain, but something in my gut told me I should. I didn't even realize how serious it was until everything started blowing up. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly, carefully, like I was afraid the moment might shatter if I moved too fast. Can you send it to me? I asked. I already sent it to a lawyer, she replied. A friend of mine. I wanted to make sure it was handled correctly. If you want, I can connect you. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not rage, not vindication. Clarity. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to explain myself to people who preferred a lie that made them comfortable. I wasn't going to apologize for surviving something that should never have happened. I contacted a lawyer the same day. Sitting in that office, laying everything out, the marriage, the accusation, the pressure to apologize, the recording, I felt oddly calm, like my body finally understood that I wasn't fighting alone anymore. This is serious, the lawyer said after listening to the audio, and it changes everything. For the first time, someone wasn't questioning my tone, or my memory, or my intentions. They were looking at facts. We sent the recording to Rohan, to his parents, to the same people who had demanded my apology. I didn't include a long message, I didn't plead, I didn't explain. Just one sentence. This is the truth. I will not be silent anymore. Rohan called me within an hour. I let it ring. Then I answered. His voice was tight, unsteady. Mira, I didn't know. I leaned back against the wall, eyes closed. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. I thought, he started. You believed the version of events that protected you, I interrupted, and you let everyone tear me apart for it. There was silence on the other end, not defensive silence, cracked silence. I'm sorry, he said. I should have listened. I opened my eyes. I don't need your apology, I said. I needed your trust, and that's gone. That was the moment I knew. Not just that I was innocent, but that my marriage was over. And for the first time since everything began, that realization didn't feel like loss. It felt like release. The truth doesn't explode all at once. It spreads, quietly, relentlessly, like water finding every crack in a structure built on denial. Within 48 hours of the recording being shared, the tone around me changed. Not with apologies at first, but with silence. The same people who had flooded my phone with accusations suddenly had nothing to say. Messages stopped mid-thread. Calls went unanswered. Group chats went quiet. Samir deleted his social media. That alone told me everything. Rohan's parents asked to meet me again. This time, they asked, not summoned. The living room looked the same, but the power dynamics didn't. Samir wasn't there. His name hovered in the room like something nobody wanted to touch. Rohan's mother couldn't meet my eyes. We didn't know, she said, hands twisting together. He was like family. So was I replied. My voice was calm. That surprised even me. Rohan sat across from me, hollow-eyed. He looked smaller than I remembered. Like the certainty he'd worn so comfortably had finally collapsed under its own weight. I confronted him, Rohan said. He denied it at first. Then he said the recording was taken out of context. I almost laughed. And then? I asked. And then he stopped answering my calls. That was the end of Samir's defense. The community reacted the way communities always do when they're forced to admit they were wrong, quietly, selectively. Some people reached out to apologize, their messages filled with words like misunderstanding and confusion, carefully avoiding the word accusation. Others pretended nothing had happened at all. Samir left the city. No dramatic farewell, no public confession, just gone. His job transferred him unexpectedly, his number disconnected. The people who once praised his character stopped mentioning him entirely, like erasing his name might erase their complicity. Rohan tried to talk to me again. He asked if we could start over, if we could go to counseling, if we could heal. I looked at the man who had chosen comfort over truth, reputation over reality. I healed, I said, just not with you. The divorce was quiet, almost clinical. No screaming matches, no dramatic courtroom scenes, just paperwork, signatures, and the steady unraveling of something that had never truly fit. When it was finalized, I felt light, not happy, not yet, but free. And the consequences didn't stop with me. Rohan's parents lost standing in the community they'd been so desperate to protect. People whispered, not about me this time, but about how easily they'd condemned their daughter-in-law without proof. Samir's name became something people avoided, a cautionary absence. And I walked away without revenge, without shouting, without needing to destroy anyone, because the truth had already done that work for me. The day I moved out for good, the apartment was quiet in a way it had never been before. No tension humming under the surface, no unspoken rules about who I needed to be, no careful calculations about whether my discomfort was worth mentioning. Just boxes, sunlight, and space. I took very little with me. Clothes, books, a few kitchen things that felt like mine. I left behind the furniture we'd chosen together, the wedding gifts still half wrapped, the version of myself who thought endurance was the same as love. When I closed the door for the last time, I didn't feel dramatic. I felt settled. Healing didn't come all at once. Some nights, I still woke up replaying that moment in my office. The shock, the fear, the way my voice sounded when I said stop. But the difference now was that I no longer questioned myself. I knew what happened. I trusted my memory. And that trust, earned the hard way, was worth more than any marriage built on silence. I started therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I'd ignored my instincts for so long. Why I'd been trained to make myself smaller to keep others comfortable. Why it had taken something this extreme for me to choose myself. Slowly, my life filled back in. Friends I'd drifted from came back. Work felt lighter. I started saying no without apologizing. I stopped explaining my boundaries like they were negotiable. I learned something important through all of this. Love that requires you to disappear is not love. Peace that demands your silence is not peace. And a partner who doesn't protect you when it's hard won't protect you when it matters. I don't regret leaving. I regret the years I spent thinking endurance was a virtue. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to take from my story, it's this. If someone shows you clearly whose side they're on when the truth is inconvenient, believe them and choose yourself anyway. That choice saved my life, and I would make it again without hesitation.